Okay, welcome back. So we're at the point where we have our ring pretty much finished. We want to unwrap this though before we do any more editing or any duplicating. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. We don't really want to have to unwrap 6 or 7 or 8 of these when we can just unwrap one. I'm just going to make a slight adjustment to that there because it's not looking quite right. Want to bring these parts together a little bit more, and that looks okay. So what I want to do is apply the solidify modifier. I'll have to go to object mode to do that, and now if you go into edit mode you can see that we have access to all the sides of these objects, and that means we'll be able to texture the side and the back as well as just the front face, or we should be able to unwrap them. Now I'm going to try something first of all. I'm just going to do a smart UV project and hit OK, and let's have a look at our UV image editor and see what we get there. So we get this unwrap, and to be honest it's not very good. We don't want these big rings because that's all wasted space on the inside. Let's change this angle limit. Let's increase that all the way up, see if we can get anything. We're not really getting anything useful there, so let's reset this unwrap and we'll unwrap this manually. So I'm just going to isolate this first of all just to make it a little bit easier to see. Now I'm not too worried about this inner edge being a seam, so let's mark that as a seam, and the same thing with this bottom edge. Don't really mind that being a seam either, so let's mark that as a seam. And now that pretty much takes us almost entirely around the object. We have this front edge here, or this back edge we want to unwrap, so I'm just going to try and grab this. Very tricky to actually grab these at the moment because we have these other modifiers, so I'm just going to hide those in the screen for the moment and go to wireframe mode so I can see the edges I want to actually grab, just here and here. Grab those, we'll mark those as well. Now I want to probably mark a seam at the bottom here, so I'm going to grab this one, seam. I'll also grab this one here and mark this as a seam. At the side here, this area, I definitely want to mark this as well. There we go, and I think everything else should unwrap pretty good. So the way this is going to work is essentially this whole front face of the ring is going to unwrap flat, and all the side pieces, all the edges on the top and the bottom are going to be attached, and then the inner ring is going to be a separate piece. Now because we're going to see this from the back and I want to make good use of UV space, I'm actually going to split this in two and mark a seam here as well. Now that seam's going to be totally hidden, so we don't have to worry too much about that. Now there might be a little bit of stretching in this area, but I'm not going to worry about that either. Let's go to face mode. Let's select all and just do a regular unwrap, and you can see that we have these 4 islands. Now let's just increase the margin just slightly. You can see how those separate, and we don't really have too much stretching in those, I don't think. They look pretty good, so I'm very happy with that. So now we can move back into object mode and we can look at duplicating these. So let's turn this back on, let's turn these modifiers back on. Let's go into edit mode first of all and look in the front view. We can actually get rid of this UV image editor for the moment. So we have to think about where we want these to be. So I think I want one at the top and then another one slightly lower, then a couple around here and another 2 at the bottom. Now looking at it, it looks as if it might be a little bit too wide, so I'm just going to scale it down just a little bit and move this up to the top. I'm going to have to do some adjusting with this in a while anyway, I'm pretty sure. So we do need to do that, we'll come to that in a minute. Let's duplicate this again about here. I want to duplicate a bunch of these. We'll redo the UV unwrap in a while as well, just because we changed the scale, because we have so many different ones. We don't want them all to be using the exact same UV template. The next thing I want to adjust is I don't want them all to be completely uniform. So for example, I could take this, I could rotate it on the Z-axis a little bit, Again, I can take this one, and the moment we're rotating from a strange position, let's just make sure we're set to median point. And see what's happening here. We're selecting based on the seam, and we hit L, or we hit 1 and we hit L. You can see we're based on the seam. We want to be based on probably sharp. Yeah, in this case sharp. Let's just select everything, rotate the axis a little bit. Let's also rotate a little bit in the view so it's a little bit off kilter. Again, get a little bit here. Keep this one pretty flat. Let's take it a wee bit off kilter again. Take this one. And I'm just being very subtle with this. It's just that very small imperfection that really sells a model. Again, bit off kilter here. I'm going to rotate this one. Well, we don't want to just rotate that face, we want to rotate the entire model. So again, let's hit L. Rotate this a little bit. And rotate this. So now we have them all slightly off kilter. We want to conform these to the barrel, so we're going to use the shrink wrap modifier. But there's a little bit of adjusting we need to do before we use a shrink wrap modifier. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this high poly 4. And I'm going to show you what would happen if we use the shrink wrap modifier just now. So we have all these as one object, called cylinder just now. Let's call this rings. And let's add a modifier. And let's call it shrink wrap. Now we could take this and we could move this up. Let's just shrink wrap it to this here, and you can see what happens. Everything is getting a little bit strange. If we go into wireframe mode, you can see that all our edges are getting deformed and stretched. Things aren't really looking the way they should. Even if we tweak the offset a little bit to bring these out of the surface, you can see that everything has pretty much just been flattened into a flat plane. Just really not working the way the shrink wrap would want to work. So let's delete that, and in the next video I'll show you the correct process for taking these and shrink wrapping them to this model without too much deformation on the actual rings. Okay, there's one last issue I want to do, or I want to deal with before I finish up this video. If I go back to this top ring, I want to actually move this a little bit. So I'm going to move it across just to line everything back up again, and that should be okay. If I go to object mode, what I also want to do is I want to reset the scale of this back to 0, back to 1. So at the moment it's at 0.24. And I can also see in the scene that these are all highlighted green, which means that we've accidentally put some keyframes on some objects. So I'll bring in a timeline, and I'll also bring in a dope sheet. I'll bring the timeline back to 0, and I'm going to select everything in the scene. Select all these keyframes and hit X and just delete those keyframes. So now we don't have any accidental keyframes or animation in the scene. And we can just make sure we've got everything selected and apply scale and rotation. Now everything in the scene is back to a 111 in scale. And let's just also name this as well. So this is going to be rings, high poly rings. So that's pretty much ready to go on the next video.